Reports of an active shooter in the Tree of Life synagogue.
Hate crimes are up in most major cities.
More than half were anti-Jewish, far more than hate crimes targeting any other religious group.
The attacks have only heightened fears that anti-Semitism is on the rise.
With thousands of Jews fleeing Europe amidst the toxic hate.
Tensions still are high on Israel's northern border as Iran promises to punish Israel.
Hamas has fired hundreds of rockets and mortars, endangering civilians.
The power struggle in Venezuela has taken a sudden, violent turn.
Recep Tayyip Erdogan, he now appears stronger than ever.
His critics fear that he's driving Turkey towards a dictatorship.
A new study has found that the bipartisan consensus of support for Israel is breaking down in the United States.
Rallying around the social media hashtag #ShowUpForShabbat, started by the American Jewish Committee.
Convening at the Global Forum reflects the strong ties between Israel and the AJC global community. AJC has always stood by Israel.
We need the clear moral voice of the American Jewish Committee. You have fought for the core values that drive democracies.
Let us choose Rahmah, meaning compassion and caring about others.
This is part of our Staatsräson, meaning the national interests of my home country. The security of Israel and the Jewish people are not negotiable to us.
History has just been made here at the AJC Global Forum.
American Jewish Committee declared that Jews cannot ensure equality for themselves until and unless it is assured for all.
Please welcome AJC Ambassadors Society member Debbie Wish.
Good afternoon and welcome to AJC Global Forum 2019. It's hard to believe that it's been a year since AJC's historical Global Forum in Jerusalem. I recognize thousands of familiar faces, and it's wonderful to be together again. It seems like only yesterday that we were filling the halls of the International Convention Center in Jerusalem, crisscrossing Israel on timely and informative excursions, convening in the Old City to proclaim the shared values we hold dear, and celebrating the miracle of Israel on its 70th birthday. This last year in Jerusalem, next year in Berlin, and it's thrilling to be in our beautiful capital this year with all of you. Much has happened in our world during the past year. During the next 48 hours, together, we will dive into an exploration of the issues of greatest importance to the global Jewish community, learn from the experts, advocate with foreign diplomats and members of the U.S. Congress, and explore the zeitgeist, the spirit of our times. But before we do that together, let us remember a dear friend of the Jewish people, of the United States, and of AJC. At the end of last summer, Senator John McCain passed away in his home state of Arizona after a lengthy battle with cancer. We remember Senator McCain for his patriotism, his courage, his code of conduct, his trademark independence, his renegade spirit, his friendship to Israel and the Jewish people, and of course his many memorable appearances at this podium, speaking to all of you at the AJC Global Forum. Please turn your attentions to the screen as we pay tribute to the late, great Senator John McCain.
For nearly a century, no organization has done more on behalf of the freedom and justice of the Jewish people and the security of the Jewish state than the AJC. This organization was founded. We must remember that the expansion of freedom, democracy, and prosperity not only makes our world more just, but also more secure. We must stand up for people who share our values because it's right, and because we have an interest in shaping conditions in the world that allow our citizens to live in peace and freedom at home. Especially appreciative of those kind words, given the approval rating of Congress these days, 12%. Have you met anyone in the 12% that approve? I have not. I often say, quite often, we're down to paid staff and blood relatives. I'm not making this up. My mother is 102 years old. I received a call from her last week. We're down to paid staff. So.
Ladies and gentlemen, AJC Board of Trustees Chair Matthew Bronfman.
Good afternoon. It is fitting that we pay tribute to Senator John McCain today. He will be remembered as an iconic American leader and a champion of a more collegial time in American politics, when reaching across the aisle to seek common ground on policy was more commonplace. In 2019, bipartisan tendencies, like those Senator McCain espoused, seem to have crumbled before our eyes. And we've even seen cracks in consensus issues of great importance to the American Jewish community, including combating anti-Semitism and support for Israel. AJC, a nonpartisan, centrist organization, and similarly like-minded organizations have found it increasingly difficult to find policy-oriented bipartisan consensus on many of our most important issues. Some of us identify as Democrats, some of us identify as Republicans. But as we watch the tepid responses of some public officials to the demonstrations of Klansmen and neo-Nazis in the streets of Charlottesville, many American Jews were left wondering. And as we followed the classically anti-Semitic tweets of certain members of Congress and the difficulties of other leaders to clearly and singularly condemn that anti-Semitism, many American Jews were left wondering. So as we continue to witness the issues that matter to AJC and to Jews across the country utilized as partisan footballs, we find ourselves suddenly asking this fundamental question: do Jews have a political home in American politics today? Here to provide their takes on this incredibly important issue are Matt Brooks, the Executive Director of the Republican Jewish Committee, and Haley Seufer, Executive Director of the Jewish Democratic Council of America. Dana Bush, CNN's Chief Political Correspondent, will moderate this timely conversation. So please join me in welcoming all three of them to the stage.
Hello.
Hi there.
So it's with an A, not a U. I'm not the daughter or granddaughter of any president that I know of. But thank you so much for doing this. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. It's so critical, and it's something that I think people think about and talk about just broadly, and to have the two of you who do this for a living talk about Judaism vis-a-vis the political parties is really key. So Haley, I'll start with you. Why should American Jews feel comfortable in the Democratic Party?
Well, this really is about values. These are the values that I marched with many of you in 1987 in Washington for the emigration of Soviet Jews, giving voice to the voiceless. I traveled with AJC in 2007 to Berlin. These are the values that we've come together for. And whether it's welcoming the stranger or loving thy neighbor as thyself, ensuring rights and freedom for others, including reproductive rights, these are the values that the Democratic Party has stood for. And the Republican Party under President Trump has enacted policies that are antithetical to those values.
And why should American Jews feel comfortable in the Republican Party?
I think there's and first of all, thank you all for not only your time in being here, but also welcoming me. As a Jewish Republican, it's an honor to be anywhere, so I appreciate, even if it is on a Sunday. But this is an important conversation, and I think, what we heard from Haley sort of represents the very big differences between how we approach our respective parties. Haley talked about the inherent Jewish values that, we all talk about Tikkun Olam. But the reality is the Republican Party shares many of those same values, but on critical issues that we care deeply about, it's not just about the values, it's about the policies. It's about standing up, standing with, and unabashedly supporting Israel. It's standing up and making sure that Iran doesn't develop a nuclear weapon. It's about making sure that we support American interests and Israeli interests in the United Nations. It's important that we have a strong and vibrant economy. And, the difference between the Republicans and the Democrats is in California right now at the Democratic Convention, they're booing candidates who say socialism is wrong off of the stage. So now we're having a debate about capitalism and socialism. There is a clear choice between the two parties, and I really look forward to exploring that a little bit further in the conversation.
Well, let's talk about that. You mentioned Israel and Iran, which is a huge calling card for Republican Jews. And I would guess that you would argue, and I'm not going to put words in your mouth, that Democratic Jews are pro-Israel, just in a different way. But talk about that.
Absolutely. For decades, the Democratic Party has stood with Israel. And you look at the Democratic leadership now, there is unanimous support for Israel. This has not changed. There are a few voices, but they don't represent the party. And some of the voices that Matt's referring to are those that we have spoken out against clearly. The Republican Party, on the other hand, is the Republican Party of Donald Trump. And when it comes to Israel's security, we could debate whether Israel's more secure or less secure under Donald Trump. But when we look at the Jewish community, we know that Jews themselves, according to the AJC's poll, feel less secure in the past year, feel less secure because of Donald Trump allowing and emboldening and engaging even in anti-Semitism. We've seen anti-Semitism and white supremacy increase under his watch, including the horrific attacks at 2 of our synagogues in Pittsburgh and Poway. And those perpetrators were emboldened by some of his policies and ideologies, and Jews feel less secure in his presidency, and they'll be voting on their security in 2020.
I think that, first of all, you mentioned, and again, sometimes facts are a little bit of a problem in that it undermines. You know, it's great to say that we have, you know, that the Jews are concerned about their security, which they are, and rightly so. And I think that we all can agree that the level of rising anti-Semitism, not just here in America, but also internationally as well. And let me put one little footnote on that. I can promise you, with 100% certainty, ladies and gentlemen, anti-Semitism in the United States did not start January 20th, 2017. It did not start with the election of Donald Trump. If you go back and look at anti-Semitic attacks against Jewish institutions in this country, they were going on in the 1950s when they were bombing synagogues in the South and elsewhere. And we've seen, in the 2000s and in the late 1900s, bombings in Overland Park, Kansas, and in California and Seattle at Jewish community centers. So this is not a problem that started with the inauguration of Donald Trump, but it's a problem that we all have to get our arms around and we have to deal with. Look, on the right, we have problems with white nationalists. We have rising anti-Semitism with the KKK and the alt-right. But on the left, there's also an anti-Semitic problem, and it's a strain that's running throughout the mainstream of the Democratic Party, not the fringe, as in the Republican Party. And I would point out, and that's reflected, by the way, you mentioned the AJC poll, but I will point to the poll that you promoted last week, in which they said, what's the real solution to making people feel more secure? And almost as many people said getting rid of Donald Trump as said fighting anti-Semitism in the Democratic Party. 39% said get rid of Trump, 31% said fix anti-Semitism in the Democratic Party. So I think to say that somehow the Jewish community monolithically thinks that they're going to sit this on the doorstep of this administration, when in fact this administration and this president in his speeches has been more out front and more categorical in denouncing anti-Semitism than any other president in history. Thank you. If you don't believe me, look, I'm a paid political hack, so take what I say with a grain of salt. But do this for yourself, for those who hissed. Go back, and the day after the Pittsburgh shooting, go read the speech that the president gave to the future farmers of America, and look at what he said about anti-Semitism. It was compelling, and it's farther than any president ever did, and it's certainly farther than Barack Obama did when he wouldn't even acknowledge
Haley, I want you to get in on
Sure.
this, but I just wanted, since you brought this up, how do you explain there are good people on both sides when, I really want to, I'm interested in your explanation when one of the sides is a neo-Nazi.
So, well, first of all, there were two sides. There were multiple sides.
Are they all good people?
No, let me address this, because again, I will point you to go back and read. Everyone should do this just for your own edification. Just fact check me. Go back and read the president's comments in that press availability. It was very clear that he was referring to the people who were there to peacefully protest the removal of the statue of Robert E. Lee in Charlottesville. But he also categorically condemned anti-Semitism. He talked about the Antifa people on the left, and he talked about the neo-Nazis and the white supremacists on the right. But we've got caught up in this whole narrative, and I realize, I'm not naive. I realize that sometimes these stories take on a life of their own. But in this case, the fact of the matter is the president, both before after the Charlottesville attack and subsequent to that, Look at what he said after that. Look at what he has done after that.
Matt, I agree with you that facts matter. But if you look at what the president said to the RJC going back to December 2015, when he said, you Jews aren't going to support me because you don't want my money and you don't want to control your politicians, and has repeated similar anti-Semitic tropes from the campaign trail to the Oval Office, including repeating conspiracy theories that were then used in emboldening white supremacists who have now targeted our community in unprecedented numbers, including the largest shooting of Jews we've ever seen in our history, there is a clear tie. And again, looking at the facts, your organization was hesitant to embrace Donald Trump because he doesn't represent our values. Yet now that he's president, you have welcomed him, and he has even repeated some of those tropes at your recent event in Las Vegas, referring to us all in terms of one big Israeli monolith. So the reality is that this president himself has said and done anti-Semitic things. And we could debate whether he's an anti-Semite or not, but anti-Semites believe he's an anti-Semite. Racists believe he's racist. And he has emboldened white nationalism in our country to levels we have never seen.
Let's break that down into its individual pieces for a second. Because, first of all, you talk about the horrific shootings in Pittsburgh and Poway. Both of those shooters, if you read their manifesto, acted because they were upset at Donald Trump for being too close, being too close to the Jewish community.
For not going far
Go
enough.
back and read the manifesto.
I've read it. Thank you.
They accuse him of being too Zionist, too pro-Israel, and too much of a Jew lover, which is what they said. Number two,
not being xenophobic
at our
enough.
event, and I know you like to talk about this, and I know it's part of the talking points. But the reality is that at our event, when he said we don't want your money, I was actually on stage with him. I'm the one who asked him the question about that. And immediately after, the ADL put out a statement that it's not anti-Semitic. So if the Anti-Defamation League says it was a joke and in context, not
the Anti-Defamation League also condemned
we can put
many
an
of
end
the
to
images and conspiracy theories that he himself and other members of Republican leadership repeated in the 2016 campaign and again in the 2018 midterms. There has been anti-Semitism used within the Republican Party, and it has unquestionably
Hey guys, I'm just
But
going
one
to
of the
jump in
things we
here
haven't-
because we've been talking a lot about the Republican Party, and I just want to give
Thanks.
you a chance to talk about the Democratic Party.
Sure.
Briefly, and you touched on this. But so to American Jews who hear about Rashida Tlaib, Congresswoman, about Ilhan Omar, new Congresswoman, these freshman Democrats who are also have made statements that are perceived, probably rightly so, as with anti-Semitic undertones, maybe even overtones. What is your response to those American Jews about why it's still okay for them to be a Democrat?
Sure. Well, they have made anti-Semitic statements, and it predates them being elected officials. And when they were candidates, we spoke out against it. We said they don't share our views on Israel, and now that they're elected officials, we said both of them, what they have said individually has been anti-Semitic. But they are two of about 280 Democrats, less than 1% of the Democrats in Congress. They don't speak for the party. That's like me saying that Steve King speaks for your whole party. I don't think he does.
He does not, which is why we took him.
The reality is, yes, after 16 years, the Republican Party took action against Steve King. Those two members of Congress have been there for 5 months. Let's see what they do. But they don't speak for the party. The reality is, your party, our country, is now represented by someone who has repeated anti-Semitic tropes to the point of emboldening an unprecedented rise of white nationalism in our country. And we give no excuses to what Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar said.
So let's talk. I want to talk about a couple of policy issues. First, you mentioned Israel. To American Jews who applaud Donald Trump for finally moving the embassy, just for example, to Jerusalem, and say, all right, a Democrat didn't do that. What do you say?
We welcome the move of the embassy. Jerusalem is Israel's capital. But the reality is that what's important, again, is not just Israel's security or policy with regard to Israel, but also our security as American Jews. And we know that this is what Jewish Americans are voting on: a wide range of domestic policy issues, such as choice, reproductive rights, immigration, treating thy neighbor as thyself, not caging children at our borders, or trying to deny people access to affordable health care. And these are the policies of President Trump that under Republican leadership we have seen go forward in this Congress, in the past Congress. So the reality is that Democrats don't have to make a choice. You don't have to choose between Israel and the values that you believe in. That's a false choice. The Democratic Party remains staunchly supportive of Israel and embodies the values that we as a community stand for.
Okay, so another, do you want to, sorry. Do you
Yeah,
want
I
to
do, because I think, I think that it's easy to come in after the fact and hitch your wagon to all the stuff that Donald Trump did, which beyond the recognition of Jerusalem and moving the embassy is, we now recognize Israel's sovereignty over the Golan Heights. We've now taken ourselves out of the Iran deal. All of the Democrats running for office say that for president want to re-engage with the Iran deal. We passed the Taylor Force Act, which cut off the money to the Palestinians, our money, our taxpayer dollars, to fund terror, Palestinian terror against Americans and Israelis. The voice of the Democrats on that has been absolutely silent, and it's great to come in now and say, rah, rah, we're with you. I was there for the opening of the embassy. I didn't see a single Democrat.
That's because
and don't tell me they weren't invited, because they were.
In ways that we've never seen before. The U.S.-Israel relationship for over 7 decades has remained a bipartisan relationship.
So go to Israel and stand with Israel.
And that will continue.
So go.
However, we have never seen this relationship politicized as much as it has been in this administration, including Ambassador Friedman, who organized quite a politicized event and has spoken in such political terms about the U.S.-Israel relationship. This is not in Israel's interest. It's not in the U.S.-Israel relationship's interest.
What's more political? The fact that none of the Democrats went to Israel, which was more politicized, the opening of the embassy, or the fact that the Democrats boycotted Prime Minister Netanyahu's speech before Congress?
So just as you chose to relitigate Charlottesville, I don't think that it's really worth relitigating this, but many Democrats felt excluded from the embassy opening because, in fact, they were. This relationship under President Trump has been politicized, and it's not in Israel's interest.
Okay, let's talk about another policy issue, and that is immigration. And
can you hand me one of those?
Yeah, of course.
Thanks.
It's getting a little steamy up here.
And by the way, I deeply respect Matt, and we've
likewise.
I think there are actually a few things we agree on.
Well, let's see if this is one of them. So immigration is such a hot topic right now, thanks to the fact that the president, brought it into the fore the minute he came down the escalator in June of 2015. And so, how? Again, if you're an American Jew looking to see which party you fit in, you think, my grandmother came over as a refugee. My father, mother came over as a refugee. They had nowhere else to go, and it was America that took them. And maybe we should be doing the same for people from Central America, or even maybe Syrian refugees, for example. What do you say to them?
Look, I believe very strong that the United States is a nation of immigrants. My grandparents came to this country, as I'm sure most people, either themselves or 1 or 2 generations removed, experienced the same thing. Nobody is talking about ending legal immigration. In fact, this president has said he wants to expand legal immigration.
But if you're a refugee, it falls under the rubric of asylum, which is what we're talking about.
But at the end of the day,
the
challenge is screening those people. The 1,000 people that crossed the border from San Antonio last week, are not necessarily asylum seekers. The problem is we have a crisis at the border that needs to be fixed. And the irony here, and again, go fact check me on this, go back and look at the speech that Chuck Schumer gave at Georgetown University. Go back and watch on YouTube, because it's great, President Obama's speech to the nation from the White House. About immigration. It is exactly everything that Donald Trump is saying. We need border security. We need to return illegal immigrants. We're going to, all the things that this president is saying. Now, because it's Donald Trump who's saying it, we're opposed. You talk about the horror of the families living in holding cells down at the border. You know the easiest way to solve that problem? Build a wall.
So
Don't let them get into the country.
Perhaps we can agree that border security is important, I'll give you that. But at your very event in Las Vegas just a few months ago, the president said our country is closed. We as Jews have faced the devastating consequences of closing borders to those in need. We have seen under this president policy on immigration discriminating based on religion. Look at the Muslim ban. We have seen families ripped apart. The Jewish community has seen we have lived the horrors. We're not going to relive the darkest moments of our history because whether it's our community or other communities, this president has enacted policies that are antithetical to our values, and immigration is case in point. Building a wall is not going to solve anything. And when it comes to this crisis, this has been a fabricated crisis. And the fact of the matter is that the president has even tweeted conspiracy theories about Jews, right? About Jews supporting this so-called caravan in advance of the midterm elections. Again, emboldening xenophobes in our country. So immigration is a great example, Dana, of where the values differences between our two parties could not be more clear. And the Democratic Party has stood aligned with Jewish values.
Correct. If you support open borders and don't want any immigration reform,
I said
please
we
vote.
agree on the importance of border security.
So you want to build the wall?
I said we agree on
you
the
want to build the wall?
Security. I don't agree with the building.
So how do you have border security without a wall? By definition.
Okay, we have 1 minute left, and in that minute, I want each of you to tell me what your respective parties can do better for the Jewish community.
Go ahead.
I think. Now look, that's an easy one. First of all, there's a reason why more Jews are leaving the Democratic Party and coming to the Republican Party. And I know Haley disagrees with it, but again, fact check me. Go look at the AJC poll that just came out today, and you will see that the identification of Jews in terms of party, the Democrats have actually dropped from 51%
What can
in the last...
Republicans do better?
Okay, well, I'm going to say to accelerate that, I think we need to talk about how the policies of the Republican policies. I got my start in politics working for Jack Kemp, the founder of the compassionate conservative movement. I think we need to demonstrate to the American Jewish community that we can care about social justice. We can care about making America a better place. We have conservative solutions to that. I think we need to continue to do a job of weeding out the radical alt-right from our party, cleaning house and making sure that they, as we have done and as our party has spoken out against, and make sure that they don't get any foothold whatsoever in the infrastructure of our party.
I think what we need to be doing is not seeing these issues solely through a political lens, but talking more and more about values. And that is why we've seen such a reduction of Jewish support for Republicans under Donald Trump, because he doesn't represent our values. And again, we can talk facts. In 2014, 33% of the Jewish community supported Republicans. In 2018, that was halved to 17%, according to Pew exit polls. So the reason that Jews are supporting Republicans less and less is because...
So Haley, what's the one thing you would do?
Talk more about values.
Values.
This is about values. These decisions are about values. They're about our security as Jews. And we have seen this dynamic change in our country under Donald Trump. So it is important that we as a community come together and talk more about our values. And that is what we as Democrats stand for. That's what our organization, the Jewish Democratic Council of America, stands for. Jewish values.
Matt, Haley, what a conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Our
Dana.
time
Thank
is
you.
up. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Please welcome AJC Director of Political Outreach, Julie Raymond.
Hello, I'm Julie Raymond, As AJC's Director of Political Outreach, it is my pleasure to introduce an exciting part of this year's Global Forum program. In the lead up to the 2020 election, over a dozen presidential candidates have produced videos, especially for AJC's Global Forum participants. We will be showing these brief films throughout our plenary sessions. These videos offer a window into the candidates' views on some of the issues at the top of AJC's agenda. I've seen each video, and I can tell you, there may be moments when you want to stand up and cheer, and there may be moments when you want to boo. For each of us, those moments may be very different, kind of like the last debate. No matter your feelings, I urge you, please do not boo. The candidates may not be here themselves to hear you, but booing is simply not a part of AJC's discourse. Clapping is. Thank you. We urge you to be respectful and civil, consistent with the tradition that has sustained AJC's political access and impact for over a century. AJC is a 501c3 nonpartisan organization. We do not support or endorse candidates. We are engaged in the political process because politics translates into policies, and those policies affect each and every one of us. You should know that we requested videos from all declared viable candidates, including the President of the United States. Thank you for your attention here, and above all, thank you for the respect that you will show throughout our program.
Hello, everyone. Joe Biden here. I just want to thank you all for supporting the American Jewish Committee and for taking part in the 2019 Global Forum. You know, for more than a century, AJC has taken up the essential work of combating anti-Semitism, not only in our society, but around the world. And I'm sorry to say the work remains even more significant today than it's been in the recent past. We see all too clearly how the poison of anti-Semitism continues to affect our society. We've mourned too many incidents and innocent lives that are lost in Pittsburgh and Poway and elsewhere. You know, when I saw what happened in Charlottesville with the Klansmen and neo-Nazis and the KKK coming out of the fields carrying torches, chanting the same anti-Semitic bile we heard across Europe in the 30s, and they were met by a courageous group of Americans, a violent clash ensued. And then the President of the United States responded by saying, quote, there were some very fine people on both sides. Very fine people? That's when I knew I couldn't stay in the sidelines. I knew I had to step up. I had to run. Make no mistake about it. We are in a battle for the soul of our nation. And we need leadership that recognizes the seriousness of this rather than assigning a moral equivalence between those who promote hate and those who oppose it. We have to stand up. We have to speak out against anti-Semitism. Because as you all have taught me over the years, as my dad taught me, silence is complicity. Because that's the way our democracy is supposed to work. Speak up. For all our faults, all our failures, we've tried to live up to our values. We have to keep moving closer to those ideas, even though we haven't met it. But we've never abandoned the notion before that unites us all as Americans. We, the people. Most of you know me. You know that what I stand for. You know that I'm running for president to restore the values that are at the core of who we are as a nation. You know, they're the same values that have long shaped my support for Israel. Because the relationship between our nations has never been about any individual leaders. It's been about the kinship, the connection, the values that Americans and Israelis share. Support for Israel is too important to be a political football or a partisan issue. It's about all that unites us as a people. Our shared democratic values, our spirit of innovation and entrepreneurship, our determination to overcome every obstacle and endure. You know, I'll never forget my first visit to Israel as a young senator in 1973. I was a freshman. I had the great opportunity of meeting Golda Meir. That's when she told me Israel had a secret weapon for her survival. She said, "Senator, we have nowhere else to go." That's why I've been so adamant that Israel be able to defend itself by itself, although we'd come to its aid, but by itself. It's not just critical for Israel's security, it's critical for America's security. I'm proud that the Obama-Biden administration demonstrated unprecedented support for Israel, including bolstering the life-saving Iron Dome system and signing a new record-setting 10-year security agreement with Israel. But friends, we also have to tell each other the truth, and that includes offering criticism on policies that are counterproductive to peace. Because despite the fact that there's violence and recrimination that we see today in the region, peace is still the most important element to Israel's security. You know, we have to help the Palestinians return to the peace table, but they have to be ready to negotiate. They have to be ready to recognize a two-state solution as the only way forward. And their children have the same rights. All children have the right to pursue their dreams and achieve their full potential. You know, defending the basic human rights and religious freedoms of all people is central to the mission of the American Jewish Committee. It's central to everything that unites Israel and the United States of America. None of this is easy. We have to try for the sake of the shared values we cherish. May God bless our two great nations with peace and prosperity and lasting friendship. And make sure, only way we can make sure, never again.
Everyone, it's Cory Booker. I want to thank the American Jewish Committee for the work you are doing to combat anti-Semitism, the fight for justice, for light, for love in the face of hate and darkness. We know what Hillel said, if I am not for myself, who will be for me? If I am only for myself, then what am I? If not now, then when? Thank you for embodying the best of Jewish ideals through your work, through your commitment to service, for your commitment to Tikkun Olam, to heal this world. We need to continue that activism. I encourage you in your mission, especially at a time where we're seeing rising hatred and rising anti-Semitism. Thank you for your work, thank you for your tradition, and may you continue in that way. Yasher Kolach.
Please welcome AJC Board of Trustees Associate Chair, Linda Morels.
For those of you who were with us last year in Jerusalem, the Faces of Israel reminded us of the Jewish homeland's beautiful diversity. From the first Ethiopian immigrant to serve as an Israeli ambassador, to Israeli Arab visionaries, giving us hope for a future of coexistence and peace. We were able to get up close and personal with the real Israel. And now that we are back in Washington, we have chosen to introduce a new series, Faces of the Diaspora. While Jews around the world share a common identity, each of us has a unique history, a unique experience to share, with traditions and rituals that together make up the global fabric of Jewish life. From diaspora communities in North and South America, Europe, Asia, and Africa, our speakers over the next 3 days will share stories that reflect the diversity of Jewish life, the priority of combating anti-Semitism, and the unifying aspects of what it means to be Jewish in 2019. In the course of this AJC Global Forum, as in the past, we will challenge our minds as we hear from policymakers, analysts, journalists, and government officials This series is more personal. It speaks to our hearts and to our souls, revealing the humanity within the work, the dynamism of our people, the sense of shared destiny, and the overarching inspiration for our global Jewish advocacy. Please welcome our first presenter.
Good afternoon. When you ask South Africans about home, no matter how long they haven't lived in South Africa, the bottom tip of Africa is where their heart belongs. I've been privileged to have grown up in this amazing country, the Rainbow Nation, the land that Nelson Mandela liberated through forgiveness and hope. And with all its imperfections, I've had the greatest privilege to have lived there as a proud Jew and a proud South African. I was born when apartheid was at its peak. I want to tell you about Mary Sabisi, our family housekeeper, my second mother, our family nanny. Mary knew Jewish songs, she prepared Shabbat dinners, and she encouraged us to embrace and be proud of being Jewish. When I think of Mary, I think to her warm hugs, her soothing voice, and her constant protection. I remember being 6 when Mary used to walk me to school daily, her on the road beside me as I owned the sidewalk, us hand in hand. And I remember going back to my mother and saying to her, this amazing woman is protecting me, she's shielding me from danger. And it was at this point when I learned something remarkably wrong that I just couldn't comprehend. I found out that Mary was walking on the road because she had to, simply because she was black. And as a 6-year-old living in this so-called perfect world, I just couldn't comprehend this, how this could be okay on any level, and also that I could have nothing to do to fix it. For those of you that know, the South African Jewish community is renowned for its warmth and welcoming of Jewish strangers from everywhere, partly because of the many thousands of Lithuanian Jews who made South Africa their home, narrowly escaping the persecution. And even though there were certain Jews that addressed and fought the injustice in their own personal capacities, there just was never the strong, united Jewish voice standing up to the horrors of apartheid. And while we can't understand the risks and the fears involved in it, I've always felt that there was always some kind of blind spot, a clear blind spot. And when we think about who we are as Jews, we are always about standing up for what is right. And it is at times like these that we would want to be involved and really stand up, be part of the table, plug into the discourse, contribute, stand up, and maybe even learn from those situations where it didn't work out in the past exactly how we wanted it to be. When our beloved Mary passed away, my sister and I spent time with her family reflecting on her amazing life just before her funeral. And what was the most remarkable thing, or the most scary, ironic thing for us, is that her family kept thanking us for all that we had done for her, and not the other way around, and in turn for them. And it was only when I was older that I got to realize how much other people had sacrificed and lost for this incredible woman to be in our lives and have the impact that she did. And really got me thinking about how we can change things, because apartheid made the unnatural feel normal. It made people's lives so terrible that there was just no way out. And when I think about Mary and other people's stories, I so often think about how the word apartheid, or the apartheid narrative, is used to describe situations and events all around the world, and especially in South Africa, where there's this identification with the downtrodden. And it really pains me, because for us as Jews, we should be able to sit down and talk about the pain of others. But at the same time, we should be able to understand that different situations have different perspectives, and that no matter how terrible human suffering is and the lack of connection, we should be able to stop and step up to the challenge to say, how do we be better? How can we be better? How can we think about a situation for what it is without losing track of its actual complexities and without losing track of the honesty? My grandmother, my beloved grandmother, came out from Europe by ship when she, just narrowly escaping the horrors of what was happening in Germany at the time. She was my personal Jewish hero, very much because when I think back on her family who rejected Judaism wholeheartedly and treated her as a stranger, she was embraced and held and clung to this incredible Jewish community and its warmth, connecting to the traditions and the amazing Jewish values that she held so dear. From my heritage and the history of growing up in South Africa, I constantly think about everything that I've learned is about standing up for what is right. And that's essentially what being Jewish has always been. It's about standing up for what I believe in and standing up for everything that other people might not, even if I have to stand alone. So many South African Jews have immigrated, and for those of us that have chosen to stay behind, there's so much building required ahead. As Mandela so famously said, there is no passion to be found in playing small, for settling for a life that is less than the one that we are capable of living. I'm really proud to be part of a piece of the Jewish community asking how we can, in small ways, no matter how small, build a brighter future for our community, for South Africa and the world. And Mary, through her love, showed us that we need to encourage each other and believe that we are enough, and that the smallest of acts and the smallest of changes can and actually do move things forward, even if we can always do more. And I guess, essentially, that's what being Jewish and being South African, Jewish South African, South African Jew, has always and will always be for me. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Hannah Rose, and I'm the president of the Union of Jewish Students in the UK and Ireland. I'm privileged every day to see the vibrancy of Jewish life up and down the country, and I hope to share a glimpse of that with you today. To set the scene, it's no secret that anti-Semitism is on the rise across Europe. It originates on the far right and the far left. It sits on the fringes of politics and the corners of the internet, and it worms its way into one of the UK's main political parties, forcing myself and a lot of young other Jews to quit the party that we used to call our political home. It puts a young Jewish woman on a neo-Nazi hit list, forcing her to move home on police recommendation. And it tells Jewish students at universities that they're not allowed self-determination, that they're not the right kind of Jew. It tells us we're not white, and it tells us we're not an ethnic minority. Trapped between the far right and the far left, sometimes it feels like we can never win. But that's not the story that I want to share with you today. Because Jewish people will not let ourselves be defined by the hatred against us, and I would not be doing my job properly if I left you with the impression that campuses were simply a hotbed of hatred. Because as the number of anti-Semitic incidents grows, so too does our resolve and our determination to be Jewish on campus, and we're winning every single day. We win by making allies, not by making enemies. We win by reinforcing positive Jewish identity in the face of hatred. You see, Jewish history over the past 3,000 years has taught us this exact lesson. We win by carrying on. This year, the Union of Jewish Students turns 100, and I'm not sure that the young Jewish leaders of a century ago could imagine what a diverse and peer-led movement would go on to achieve. 8,500 students on 70 campuses, 6,000 students listening to Holocaust survivors in 40 cities, 4,000 students engaged in mental health campaigning, 3,000 students running social action initiatives, and the list goes on. We've all read the headlines. They say that campus is riddled with anti-Semitism. They say that young people are disengaged and disinterested. Apathetic, they call us. Well, this doesn't look like apathy to me. The reality is that our community is changing, with young people leading the way, and we all need to change with it. The past century of Jewish communal life has seen huge changes culturally, yet our programming and our communication remains completely static. The community needs to stop asking, how can young people come to us, and start asking, how can you come to us? And here's the answer. Through partnerships, not paternalism. Through listening, not lecturing. And through dialogue, not division. Young people, like the students I represent, are the future of the Jewish community, and we're already taking on that challenge. Thank you.
Please welcome AJC Global Director of Young Leadership, Sefi Kogan.
Good afternoon, everyone. In addition to being AJC's Global Director of Young Leadership, in my spare time, I host AJC's podcast, AJC Passport. That's our weekly podcast that analyzes global affairs through a Jewish lens. Folks, together we are going to be a part of something historic right here at the AJC Global Forum. This, right now, is about to be the largest ever live audience for an AJC Passport episode. What does it mean to be part of a live show of a podcast? Well, I'll tell you, when you clap, our audience will hear it. When you laugh, our audience will hear that too. When you sneeze, you get the idea. And please, don't sneeze. Later this week, you can listen to the episode of AJC Passport by heading to our website, ajc.org/passport, or by just going on your phone to the Apple or Google podcast app. And by the way, those directions will also work for you to share it with your friends and family so that they can subscribe and listen in to the episode that you're about to see. So in just a moment, we're going to start the recording. Before we do, I thought I would warm all of you up. So on the count of 3, can we get a test round of applause? What? Not yet, not yet. 1, 2, 3. Perfect. This is perfect. Okay, here we go. Hello, and welcome to a very special AJC Global Forum live show of AJC Passport. Longtime listeners to AJC Passport will know that we often talk about 3 main sources of anti-Semitism in the world. Those 3 sources are the far left, the far right, and certain radical segments of the Muslim community. The most prominent and alarming manifestation of far left anti-Semitism is today's British Labour Party and its leader, Jeremy Corbyn. It is a party that has been cited for harboring institutional anti-Semitism. Whether that takes the form of blatantly anti-Jewish comments masquerading as criticism of Israel, statements of support for terrorist groups Hamas and Hezbollah, or age-old conspiracy theories about Jewish power controlling financial markets, media institutions, and the government. Too many leaders in the Labour Party have been complicit, or at the very least apathetic, about this rise of anti-Semitism. Now, don't get me wrong. There have been those courageous few who've stood up within the party, like our friend John Mann, a member of parliament who we here at Global Forum will hear from tomorrow. But the largest bit of news about all of this was the defection that took place in February when several members of parliament from the Labour Party left. Some of them even set up a new party themselves. We now have 2 of those Labour defectors with us today. So please welcome members of Parliament Joan Ryan and Ian Austin. Welcome. Welcome. Well, thank you both so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Many on the left have sought to downplay the importance of your leaving the Labour Party by saying, well, you weren't all that left-wing before anyway. Is that true? Can you each tell us, Joan, maybe we'll start with you, can you tell us a little bit about what brought you to the Labour Party in the first place?
Well, they didn't say that for the 38 years I was a member, so it took them a heck of a time to reach that conclusion. I joined the Labour Party because of its values, and they coincided most closely with my values centred around equality, which is the founding principle of Labour, which is why it's so awful where Labour is now, because it should be the frontline defence against any kind of intolerance or racism. But I didn't really leave the Labour Party, it left me. It left those values of decency, equality, respect, tolerance, live and let live, all those things, and they manifested themselves in the shape of this appalling anti-Semitism that we see.
And Ian?
Well, thanks, Seffi. I mean, my dad came to Britain in 1939 as a 10-year-old Jewish refugee from Ostrava in Czechoslovakia. He was the only member of his family to escape. His mother and sisters were murdered in Treblinka. And so I grew up, not Jewish myself, but I grew up listening to him tell me about the Holocaust, tell me about racism and prejudice, tell me that these things were wrong. And it was because of that, it was to fight racism, really, that I joined the Labour Party as a teenager 35 years ago. And I could not have believed that I would be leaving the Labour Party because of racism too. That's why I left. I left because Jeremy Corbyn, I think, has poisoned the Labour Party with an appalling culture of intolerance and anti-Semitism. And so my values haven't changed at all. I left to fight racism in exactly the same way as I joined the Labour Party all those years ago as a teenager.
Now, I'm trying to imagine, and I invite our audience members to imagine with me the analog here in America, right? Imagine if, 10 or so members of the Democratic Party or of the Republican Party, members of Congress from the party, were to say, forget about it. It's not for me, and to actually leave and to continue to represent their districts in Congress, either as an independent or as a member of a new party. That would be an absolute political earthquake. Is that the way that your leaving was felt in the UK?
Yes, I think so. I think it was a political earthquake. It covered the news all of that week. It had a big impact on Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party's poll ratings. And I think, obviously Ian can speak for himself, but I think for both of us, we left because of this anti-Semitism, because of this racism towards Jews. And I think as we did that, we were very aware that you only get one go at that. You can't resign week in, week out. You can't walk away from your party more than once. And that it's for good once you've done that. And so I think both of us worked very hard in the 24 hours surrounding having done that to ensure that the people in the United Kingdom and in our constituencies and in the Labour Party understood exactly why we had done this, that was the opportunity to absolutely draw back the curtain on what was happening in the Labour Party, and that the Labour Party was infected with anti-Semitism, that the Labour Party, it wasn't just a case of a few bad apples, that what we were seeing here, what we were witnessing, was institutional anti-Semitism in its very organisation, in its processes, in its complete unwillingness and inability, because of its ideology, to tackle this anti-Semitism.
And that's the phrase, institutionally anti-Semitic, that Member of Parliament Luciana Berger, one of actually only a few Jewish members of Parliament who left the Labour Party, that she used at that memorable press conference. That's about as strong an indictment as I could possibly imagine. Ian, is there anything that the Labour Party could do to regain respectability at this point?
Look, I think it's very difficult to see how that could happen under Jeremy Corbyn's leadership, because I think he has spent 30 or 40 years working with all sorts of extremists. He has this view of himself that he is so virtuous, that he has sort of impeccable anti-racist credentials, that he could not possibly be guilty of racism, and so this must all, he thinks, be a plot and a smear and a campaign to undermine him. And he genuinely believes, and I'm not exaggerating when I say this, he really believes that he is the victim in all of this. So not only does he not understand that it's a problem, if he did understand it, he wouldn't be able to solve it. If he wanted to, I mean, if he was capable of solving it, I don't think he would want to. I think he really doesn't. He's incapable of understanding the scale of this. And so I think it is very difficult to see how the Labour Party can be saved. But look, I left because I wanted to... It's not like I walked away from the fight. I think it was an act of taking the fight on this issue to Corbyn that I left. And I left in order to try and encourage other people in the Labour Party to step up and do the right thing too. And there are some signs of that, although not nearly enough.
Joan, this week it was announced that the Equality and Human Rights Commission in the UK, the EHRC, is going to launch a formal inquiry into anti-Semitism in the Labour Party. Can you explain to our audience, first of all, what that body is and why this is a significant step?
This is the commission in the United Kingdom that assesses whether an organisation has crossed that line and crossed the line of equalities and human rights. We have quite a lot of good legislation around equalities and human rights, and they will make an independent investigation, which we've called for some time, into what's happening in the Labour Party. We've had all kinds of incidents. I'm sure everybody is aware of some of them, but week in, week out, there's another incident. And we've had death threats against Jewish members of Parliament and others, and the Labour Party has not informed them of this. We've had people saying the most incredibly vile things that you just could not believe would ever have been said in the Labour Party prior to Jeremy Corbyn's election in 2015. And they've hidden it, they've interfered. The leader's office, the evidence is now, through many, many leaked emails, that they've hidden this evidence and that they've interfered in the process by which this kind of, the disciplinary process, in other words. So there is a great deal of evidence that they're covering it up, they're colluding with this, they're making it happen. It's an absolute indictment of the Labour Party, because the only other political party that's been investigated or looked into in this way is the BNP, the British National Party, the far-right party. Because, of course, you know, this kind of thing is not the preserve of the far left. We see it on the far right as well. But I say again, the Labour Party, the very party, the first line of defence against this kind of racism and intolerance, is being investigated by our Equality and Human Rights Commission. It's frankly quite unbelievable. But what really worries me, I'm very pleased they're doing it, but I'm very worried that the reaction in the UK to what's happening in the Labour Party is not what it should be. It's becoming normalised. And that's why I think it was important what Luciana Burgess said, what I've said, what Ian said about this is not to be tolerated. It is wrong, and we can't be complicit with it. And I hope many more MPs will leave. I know they agree with us. They tell us behind the scenes. They need to have the courage of their convictions. If you're not in politics, to stand up for what you believe in, to do the right thing on behalf of your constituents and everybody else, I don't know what the purpose of being in politics is if it's not that.
Completely right.
Do you have faith in the EHRC's process?
Well, I've no reason not to have, I should say. As I say, they looked at the BNP, but they didn't have to launch a full inquiry. It was quite clear what was going on in the BNP. So I haven't got a lot to measure it against, but I have no reason not to be. They've been considered in their approach. They approached the Labour Party, who didn't even take their initial response to the National Executive Committee. There is no democracy in the way the Labour Party runs at the moment at all. They didn't take it to their national executive body that runs the party. Two of Jeremy Corbyn's appointees, who work in the leader's office, one of whom's General Secretary, they worded the response. So we don't know what it says. There's no reason Ian and I should know anymore. We're not actually in the Labour Party. But the Labour Party don't know either, and neither do their national body. But, you know, is any of this a surprise? We're talking about a leader who calls Hamas and Hezbollah his friends.
For those of us who are Anglophiles, and I count myself in among that number, we're watching the UK with maybe a little bit of a sense of dismay. And we're seeing, you know, Labour seems to be, I guess the technical term is a dumpster fire. But we're not seeing much better from the Conservatives. You would think that someone would be capitalizing on one side or the other of the aisle, but in fact, even as Conservatives' political fortunes head downward, Labour's are not trending upward, which should be considered an indictment of the leader. Ian, if there were a leadership election to be held tomorrow in the Labour Party, would Jeremy Corbyn win again?
I think he probably would. I mean, I think he would. I think that the truth is the Labour Party membership has increased massively, but that's because lots of people from fringe organisations and outside the Labour Party have joined to support his policies. But look, Jeremy Corbyn and the people around him have taken what was a mainstream political party, the political party of Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, steadfast supporters of Israel, completely on the side of Britain's Jewish community, and they've turned it into something completely different, way off on the fringes of British politics, on the hard left, and that's because he spent 30 years of his entire time in politics mixing with and defending all sorts of extremists and in some cases terrorists and anti-Semites. And the point Joan was making earlier about the EHRC investigation, this is really, really critical. I mean, this is a statutory organisation. It has the legal powers to seek evidence, to demand emails and all sorts of other records. And so for this to be happening, for them to believe that there is a case to be answered, that the Labour Party has discriminated against Jewish people and is responsible and has become institutionally anti-Semitic is utterly seismic, absolutely seismic. It's an absolute scandal. It's something that every Labour MP and every Labour Party member should be deeply ashamed of, and all of them should be working night and day to put this right.
Absolutely.
Here's what I'm worried about. What I'm worried about is that you are not just visitors from the other side of the Atlantic, but that you're visitors from the future. I'll tell you what I mean by that. Apropos of the conversation that happened just a few minutes ago about political homelessness in this country, for American Jews in this country, I think it's not that hard to see, to draw a straight line from where we stand today in 2019 America to a situation that looks something like what you are encountering in the United Kingdom with the Labour Party. I'm not going to point fingers here as to whether we could be talking about. I think there's a case to be made that we could be talking about the Democratic Party or we could be talking about the Republican Party. With that in mind, Joan, and then I'll actually ask both of you, but Joan, what lessons do you have for us from the future, as it were? What can we do? What should we do now in order to kind of arrest the slide that our parties are taking?
We have reflected on this quite a lot, and I think it is important that others in different parts of the world look at what's happened to us, because it happened so fast and it's gone so deep that really it is quite unbelievable. So I think you have to be ever vigilant. I think the first lesson is you call out anti-Semitism wherever, whenever you come across it, and you do it right from the beginning. You don't wait.
Completely right.
It's like a virus, And if you don't do that right from day one, right from the first instance, then it will take a hold. And that's what's happened in the Labour Party. I think the second lesson I would identify is that you have to be very clear about what your red lines are. Where is it that you say, anti-Semitism? I knew that what she was saying was true. I watched her on my TV screen and I could not but act in solidarity with her. I knew what she was saying was the truth. I'd already crossed more red lines than I thought I would. I think it's really important that people, parties, groups, caucuses, whatever, work out what their red line is and what they're going to do about it. And their red lines need to be attached to their traditional values and to the values, if ours had been attached to the traditional values of the Labour Party, maybe more Labour MPs would have left, but we'd already crossed a lot of red lines. I think you've got to try and avoid that. And I also think we've got to understand that you can't deal with a hard left leadership in the way you would deal with a normal party leadership. And they operate differently. They're secretive and obsessed with purity. And you've got to be very careful with them that you don't fall into trading access for your silence. And that has happened in the Labour Party with their various inquiries that people have participated in, or we will give some training to members, and it's like buying you off. At best naive, at worst it makes us complicit. Have to recognise that it's highly unlikely you're going to get very far at all. That isn't the way you're going to solve this problem, by engaging with it. And I think we also have to understand that we've got a lot of work to do in not just the public, but parliamentarians themselves, members of Congress, members of whatever, understanding the real challenge we face in communicating what anti-Zionist anti-Semitism is and helping people to understand it. And whilst we're doing that, we've got to find the language with which to do that, because they're very busy saying they're just trying to close down criticism of Israel. It's just a smear. These are easy lines to roll out. And finally, I'd say this mustn't be a counsel of despair, that we've got to offer hope. We have to know what we're for, not just what we're against. I'm a big fan and supporter of the International Fund for Israeli and Palestinian Peace. And I think particularly for young people, they can be drawn to BDS, not because they want to demonize and delegitimize Israel, but because they want to do something, they want to be active. We've got to offer the alternative that doesn't drive people apart, but brings Israelis and Palestinians together in coexistence, people-to-people work.
I see that we're out of time, so folks, let's get one more round of applause, please, for Joan Ryan and Ian Austin.
Thank you.
Now it's time for our closing segment, Good for the Jews, where each week I share one final thought about a recent development in the world and try to answer that age-old question. Is it good for the Jews? Washington, D.C. Good for the Jews? One of the first Jewish residents of Washington was Isaac Pollock, who arrived in 1795 and finished the construction of the brick buildings to the west of the White House that would be used to house the State Department and later serve as the home of James Madison and Martin Van Buren. In 1852, 21 newly arrived Jews created the first synagogue in the district, the Washington Hebrew Congregation. In order to guarantee the right of the Jewish community to own land, Congress passed an act for the benefit of the Hebrew congregation in the city of Washington, which was signed into law by President Franklin Pierce in 1856. 13 years later, following the timeless tradition of disgruntled members forming a breakaway synagogue, Addis Israel Congregation was formed. President Ulysses S. Grant donated to the building fund, and when construction on the synagogue was completed on the American Centennial in 1876, Grant attended the dedication, a remarkable turnaround for the general who had once expelled all Jews from territory he controlled during the Civil War. Today, the DC metro area is the third largest Jewish community in the United States with 300,000 Jews. And our government institutions are plenty Jewish too. 36 of the 535 members of both houses of Congress are Jewish, as are 3 of the 9 Supreme Court justices. However, despite what New York Magazine and Fox News once printed about Barack Obama and Donald Trump respectively, there hasn't yet been a Jewish president. As I look out at this crowd and see an audience of over 2,500 committed Jews and allies gathered in our nation's capital, I cannot help but be inspired by our community, this city, and our nation. We have 300 college students from some of the finest universities in the world, many of which once severely limited the number of Jews who could attend. We will dine with ambassadors from dozens of countries, speaking truth to power and letting them know that our community cares deeply about the affairs of the world. And we will go to Congress en masse, meeting with our elected representatives as proud Americans petitioning our government. Washington might have its challenges, and bashing this city will never go out of style. But Washington, D.C. is undoubtedly good for the Jews. Thank you.
Brilliant.
Please welcome incoming AJC President and Chair of AJC Board of Governors, Harriet Schleifer.
Good afternoon. As AJC's incoming president and chair of the Board of Governors, it is my honor to present this year's Jan Karski Award. At the outbreak of World War II in September 1939, Jan Karski joined the Polish army. After being captured and held prisoner by the Soviets, he escaped and joined the Polish underground movement. He then became a courier and conveyed secret information between the Polish resistance and the Polish government in exile. In late 1940, while on a mission, Karski was captured by the Gestapo and brutally tortured. Fearing that under duress he might reveal secrets, he slashed his wrists. But he was sent to a hospital from which the underground helped him escape. In late 1942, Karski was smuggled in and out of the Warsaw Ghetto and also a transit camp at Izbica, where he saw firsthand the horrors suffered by Jews under Nazi occupation, including mass starvation and the transport of Jews to death camps. Karski then traveled to London, where he delivered a report to the Polish government in exile and to senior British authorities, describing what he had seen and warning of Nazi Germany's plans to annihilate European Jews. In July 1943, Karski journeyed to Washington and met with President Roosevelt to give the same warning and plead for action. Karski stayed in America and dedicated the rest of his life to teaching at Georgetown, to Polish-Jewish relations, to the anti-communist struggle in his native Poland, and to keeping the memory of the Holocaust alive. Karski's heroism cannot be overstated. Without his efforts, critical information may never have made it to the Allies, and countless more Jewish lives, including those of my family and others, would have been lost at the hands of the Nazis. AJC knew Jan Karski well until his death in 2000. We honored him memorably at an earlier global forum. And after his passing, we created this award to honor Jan Karski's memory. Today, we invoke his selfless spirit as we honor another individual who continues to demonstrate unimaginable courage in the face of darkness. This year, it is our privilege to present the Jan Karski Award to Mithal al-Alusi. Mr. Alusi, who traveled all the way from Baghdad, Iraq, to be with us today, has been a fearless proponent of the Arab world's acceptance of Israel and in the pursuit of Arab-Israeli peace, in a region where doing so means putting your life at risk. As you will learn from the video you're about to see, Mithal has paid dearly for this remarkable courage. Yet his resolve to bring about a more constructive, more cooperative Middle East has only strengthened. He has never compromised on his core values and vision. Please turn your attention to the screens.
And why should I not talk to Israel? I look to the Israeli and American as supporter for the peace in the Middle East.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mithal al-Alusi.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. It is really a great honor for me to be here. It is really a great honor for me to receive this award in a time where the Middle East is in totally chaos and nobody knows what can be happening tomorrow. The fascists, they are taking over and controlling Middle East in general, Iraq through the Iranian militia and the Iranian Revolution Guard, and Lebanon through Hezbollah, and other Iranian Revolution Guard network everywhere. Ladies and gentlemen, as I went first time to Israel in 2004, I thought it cannot be truth. If somebody did kill Iraqi Muslim or Iranian or other Arabs, he's a terrorist. If the same guy who will kill Jewish or Israeli, he's a good man. It cannot be truth. That's why I went to Israel in this counter-terrorist conference. Also to break the taboos, to have a new start for both nations, Israel state and Israeli nation, as well as Iraqi nation. Ladies and gentlemen, I have with a great pleasure and honor to thank you, AJC, to be and to support to fight against the anti-Semitic position in Orient and everywhere. But what does mean for us? Anti-Semitic, does mean militias, does mean Hezbollah, does mean General Qasem Soleimani, does mean corruptions, does mean terrorists, does mean people they have no respect for a human being, does mean Islam is fascist and they do not have any kind of values and standard and respect for human being, for peace, and for the new generation. They are playing with the human being, they do enjoy it. Ladies and gentlemen, ISIS is part of the history, or part of the reality. Both, sorry to say it. I am a Muslim and I am proud to be Muslim and proud to be Iraqi. Both Sunni and Shi'i, they do agree to destroy Israel. This is the reality of those Islamic parties. They do agree to kill people. That's why we are not wondering to have seen Hamas, Hezbollah, Sunni and Shi'i, both totally extremists, working together with the Iranian regime, Iranian fascists, to reach their goals. We know what that means, their goals. We know it in Iraq. They did kill their own neighbors. They take over through the democratic tools, exactly as has been done one day in Europe. Through election, they are controlling a human being. There is no democratic process in Iraq. Ladies and gentlemen, I went again in 2005 to Israel. This time, to be honest with you, they say, we will kill you if you do it. They did kill already my sons and my colleague. I went there to tell them, I will continue going there, I will continue working for peace and being together. Ladies and gentlemen, I ran an election and I did witness it. Honestly, I don't believe that much thousands of Iraqi, they did vote for Mithal because they did listen to my program. No, maybe two other positions or reason. One, because I went to Israel. There is many Iraqi. They remember the Iraqi Jews as a friends, as a neighbors, as a good memory. But the ban-Arab fascists and the ban-Islamists, they don't allow them to be normal and to have such kind of connection to their old neighbors and old people. This is one of the reasons. The second reason, people, they vote to Mithal and my list because I am opposed to the Iranian. I am opposite to Islamist parties, fascist militias, Hezbollah, and Hamas. And I did say it publicly many times, because I know why and I know how dangerous they are. By the third time, 2008, I was already a member of the Iraqi parliament. I was also advisors for my government and my prime minister, and etc. Always they told me, Mithal, please forget the issue of Israel. Don't talk about it. Don't go there. You are one from us. You will be one from our main ministers. I was laughing about that. They want to tell me I have to sell myself. I have to accept this price. I have to be one of them. I came to Israel to make it clear, and I just say it there. We need, ladies and gentlemen, an ally. We need an ally existing from, that's what I just say that days. United Arab Emirates, Jordan, Iraq, Israel, Turkey, Great Britain, United States. We need that because we need to understand the fascists, they will be very, very dangerous in the next days. We need to have this alliance because the fascists, they will create a new kind of terrorists. Ladies and gentlemen, maybe there is people, they believe I am a dreamer. Well, good. I am dreaming from something normal, from something which we needed for our new generation, for something to have a stability and really to push for a human rights and a human being. Ladies and gentlemen, I did really enjoy it today to have seen the democratic position between parties, American parties. I do really enjoy it. I wish one day we will have it in Iraq. We will have such kind of discussion. But I do really hope and dream from an American position, which there is no discussion when it's come on the fascists and the Iranian fascists and the Iranian dangers. Ladies and gentlemen, we have to take them very serious. They did kill hundreds of thousands of people. They did display millions of people. They did steal our dreams and the right to exist as a normal human being. Women, they have no right in the Iraqi society. They have no right in Hamas, in Gaza. They want to talk about right and value and values. We know them very well. They are our colleague in the parliament, our colleague in the government. They are my colleague. They are playing on time. Tehran, Mr. Qasem Soleimani, the Iranian Revolution Guard, they are playing in time. Why do they need 150,000 missiles and rockets in Hezbollah? Why do they need that? Why do they need to threat us again and again? The Strait of Hormuz will be closed. The other areas under our control. Why do they need that? Ladies and gentlemen, the state of Israel is the fully right for the Jewish people, and they have to exist in peace. We need also to exist in peace. But no one from us can be saved. If those people still controlling the budget, controlling the weapon, and they have the power of state. The Iranian people, they are looking for to be free. The Iranian looking, they are good people. The Iranian people, they have the right to exist as a normal human being. We don't need to have the representative of God sitting in the chair and advise us how we should do it, which one is good, which one is wrong. Iraqi Jewish Committee is a very proud committee. We like them, we know them. There is no normal Iraqi which he cannot tell you a good story about the Iraqi Jewish Committee. I am very, very thankful you gave me this honor. And this award and this honor is not only for me, for all of the Iraqis, which they stand up against fascists and Iranian threat. Help us to be free. Thank you.
Any cause that anyone wants to fight for, they need to be present. There's no one who's gonna be there for you if you're not there for yourself. I grew up in Venezuela, where in my last few years there, we saw the rise of anti-Semitism. And one thing I learned is that most anti-Semitic acts are caused by ignorance of people who have never had contact with the Jewish community before. In today's world, where most young people are apathetic about the issues, we need an organization that raises awareness from high school through adulthood. We want to create a safe environment for Jews around the world where we don't have to worry everywhere we go about anti-Semitism. The most important thing that Access does is reach out to young professionals across other communities. When those young professionals becomes the leaders at the tables of their communities, we will have partnerships already built for us to engage with. What Access brings is an energy that is viral. It will get other people, not just our age, but younger, to be interested in the causes of the organization. AJC is able to raise a community of young professionals who will become one day the leaders of AJC. We stand strong with what we believe in, and we are present and active. And by doing that, we are defining the world we live in. We're making a better place.
Please welcome AJC Project Interchange alumna Huranessa Faryad.
Good afternoon. Assalamu alaikum, shalom, Ramadan Mubarak, and in a few days it will be Eid Mubarak. If you don't know, Tuesday will be our holiday to end the holy month of Ramadan. My name is Huranessa Faryad, and I am head of outreach and interfaith at the All Dulles Area Muslim Society. I was born in Afghanistan, and given the situation, when I was 5 years old, my family and I immigrated to the United States as refugees. I grew up in New York City. I was waiting for that. And I graduated from Hunter College when I lived there. No, we got some. And I know that Hunter College president is a Project Interchange alumna. When I was young, my father used to tell me stories about how Muslims and Jews lived together in Uzbekistan. That's where he grew up prior to fleeing to Afghanistan. He used to tell me about stories how they loved one another and respected one another. They, played music together for generations. It was normal to be Muslim and Jewish over there. It was just simply normal. Now, looking back and seeing these things and bringing it into light in my work right now that I do as head of outreach and interfaith at the Adams Center, all these things from my past inspired me to get into interfaith work and to work with people of different faith backgrounds. At the Adams Center, I oversee interfaith activities. I also am the Adams representative for interfaith and civic coalitions, and I testify on legislation that is important to the American Muslim community. Every day, I get to see AJC and how it champions the work that it does, and it works through part of their organization called MJAC. MJAC stands for the Muslim Jewish Advisory Council. If you're not familiar with it, you should get to know them. Through MJAC, we explore what it means to build bridges with other faith groups, to counter bigotry and hate, to promote religious freedom all across America and the world. Now, if you don't know MJAC, I'm going to do what New Yorkers are known for, and that's calling people out. MJAC's director is here, and I just want to give a shout out to Ari Gordon. Where are you, Ari? He's my Jewish brother. Much love to you. So given all these things and the things that I've done in my work and going on this trip, you could see where the connection comes together. And I wanted to go on this trip through Project Interchange and see what it's like over there and figure things out for myself. And there are 3 things that happen on this trip that will always be ingrained in my memory. First one being able to go to Jerusalem. Now, it's a place where so many different faith groups come together to worship, to connect to God, to relive history, to be able to connect to what means so important to them, the things that are dear to their hearts, to go to Masjid al-Aqsa and pray our Friday Jummah prayer there, to go to the Wailing Wall, to go to the different churches and experience all these people from all around the world in one place worshiping God. And I thought that was just beautiful to be able to go and experience that. Then we went on this beautiful trip to a city called Haifa. Now in Haifa, there's this really great Baha'i garden, and it kind of looked like it's ascending up into heaven. So as I kept looking, it just kept going up and up. And it was just beautiful to see that in a place where, again, religion, culture, background, history all come together. We were invited to a school. It's actually an interfaith school in Haifa. And we went and we were part of just a group of people sitting in the audience and listening to imams, rabbis, Druze imams, and priests talking about interfaith work. And everyone in the audience, except for us older people, were high schoolers. And then they asked if one of us would like to speak, and so the group chose me. And I was honored to speak as a Muslim woman in hijab, to go up there with a panel full of men to be able to go up there and speak, and it was my honor. And then afterwards, after I spoke, and I told them that your job is to love one another, is to be there for one another, and that's something that is promoted through all of our faiths, right? Is to respect one another, to allow us to worship God the way we want to give us that space, to be able to afford someone else the right to live the way they want to without impinging our beliefs on them. Right? And they understood that. And they knew what I was talking about, because after my speech was done, they came up to us and wanted to take selfies. And I thought, oh my God, I'm so cool, because the high schoolers want to take selfies with me and the group, so it was great. But afterwards, we went into another room and we spoke to the panel of clergy, and just the things they had to say and the important work that they're doing, and we gave them a lot of credit for being able to do the work that they're doing. Last but not least was the ending of the trip. And so there we were as the sun was setting and we were flying over the Mediterranean in helicopters. I was inspired to sing a song, which I actually taught my choir. And it's actually a Hebrew song. And it goes a little bit something like this. Od yavo shalom aleinu ve'akulam. Peace will come to us all. Thank you. Shalom. Assalamu alaikum.
Hello, I want to extend my greetings to everybody attending the AJC Global Forum. My name is Pete Buttigieg. I'm the mayor of South Bend, Indiana, and a Democratic candidate for president. It's almost exactly a year since I had the eye-opening experience of an AJC Project Interchange visit to Israel and the West Bank with a number of my fellow mayors. It was extraordinary to see firsthand the achievements of what's taken place in Israel, as well as to see the geographic immediacy and the intimate boundaries of a territory that we hear so much about on the news here at home, but don't often really take the trouble to go and understand. As the AJC folks that we went out with promised on the front end, many of us left that trip with as many questions as answers. But most importantly, it was a chance to come into contact with the urgency of peace, the need for a two-state solution, and the need to make sure that the U.S.-Israel alliance is pointing in a direction that is going to be beneficial for Israeli, Palestinian, and American well-being, pointing, in other words, in the direction of peace. This is also a time of disturbing anti-Semitism on the rise around the country and around the world. We've seen it in despicable, violent attacks right here in the United States, from Pittsburgh to San Diego. We see it in rising white nationalism, violent and demonstrating across our country. And it is time to make sure that we are unified across the American political spectrum in establishing that hate has no home here. I also believe that we have an opportunity to put our arm around our Israeli allies and make sure that we are a constructive influence and a force for peace. One of the concerns that we shared with our Israeli hosts when we were visiting is the extent to which support for Israel has become a partisan issue in the United States. I think that's a trend that we need to work hard to end. We need to make sure that we are steadfast in our support for Israel and for the U.S.-Israel alliance, while also continuing to advance a policy direction that is going to lead to peace and security for the Israeli and Palestinian people. I'm committed to doing that as president, and I'm thankful to the AJC for the opportunity to walk alongside you, to learn from your members, to engage everybody from experts and policymakers to journalists and activists that you bring together in order to discuss these incredibly important issues. And I also bring you greetings from the vibrant Jewish community right here in South Bend, Indiana. Thanks again for the opportunity to communicate with you here, and I'm looking forward to continuing to be in contact as this campaign proceeds and beyond.
Please welcome incoming AJC Regional Offices Chair, Bob Newmark.
Good afternoon. I recognize that you've been seated for quite some time, so perhaps we'll start off with something a little participatory. If you are able, and if you are associated with a regional office or have attended a regional office event, could you please stand? Wow. So, what this says to me is that the regional offices are, in many ways, they are AJC. You can be seated. 75 years ago, AJC's leadership recognized that our voice needed to be heard across the country. They understood that there were committed Jewish community leaders in cities around the United States who would be inspired by AJC's mission and values. They realized that a powerful network could be leveraged to amplify our voice and strengthen our cause. As a past president of AJC St. Louis, I've seen firsthand the impact and power of 22 regional offices. These offices are a microcosm of the entire organization. They engage in diplomatic, legislative, and intergroup advocacy. They serve as AJC's voice to the media and to the larger community. They help shape AJC's perspective on key issues. They raise critical resources, and they model the incredible partnership between our exceptional professional staff and our dedicated lay leaders that is foundational to AJC's effectiveness. Our regional offices position AJC as an essential voice in their Jewish communities. They act as local portals to AJC's global advocacy network. And through the regions, we bring our global expertise and perspective to the local communities. And we build the foundation of our global network and its advocacy reach. Our on-the-ground grassroots work around the country is a critical component of our global advocacy. The regions are, as we like to say, local, global and local. Many of you are here today, as we just saw, because of your relationship to one of our regional offices. You've seen up close, you've been a part of the impact our work has had in your communities. Please join me in celebrating 75 years of remarkable achievements across the country, and in congratulating our regional office network on this milestone anniversary.
The story of AJC's regional offices begins in the 1940s when our founders called upon Jewish immigrants to move beyond New York City, to settle in other parts of the United States. From that early vision grew today's powerful network of 22 regional offices, through which AJC reaches all 50 states, every population center, and all aspects of Jewish life. The creation of formal chapters began with an initial group of 9 cities. AJC continued to expand across the country, amplifying our collective voice and creating a more powerful whole. The regional offices have sparked and led our advocacy initiatives on combating anti-Semitism, supporting Israel, and advancing democratic values and pluralism. The partnerships built by AJC's regional leaders drive our work, advance our mission, and deepen our impact. From creating coalitions with diverse ethnic and religious communities, to strengthening diplomatic ties with foreign consulates, from local, state, and federal advocacy, to engaging Jewish community leaders. The regional offices raise vital resources and create the leadership pipeline for AJC. Through our regional network, AJC's voice reaches communities around the country and the world, connecting the local to the global. To our regional leaders, thank you for 75 years of impact. Our global advocacy depends on our powerful network of regional offices, and the relationships you build at home help change the world.
Please welcome AJC Interreligious Affairs Chair, David Inlander.
Good afternoon. In the years that I've been involved with AJC, there are any number of special moments seared into my memory, from traveling the world to, at last year's Global Forum, welcoming the leader of the world's largest Muslim organization to Jerusalem. I thought I had seen it all. But on this night, in this place, I am here to invite all of you to one of the most historically significant events in AJC's history. In the spirit of last year's powerful expression of AJC's values in the Old City of Jerusalem, this evening we had planned to bring you to an iconic Washington landmark, the Lincoln Memorial, for a similarly historic event. But alas, we hit a snag out of our control as thunderstorms have been rolling into the DC area. And so we are unable to bring AJC Global Forum to this outdoor venue. However, at AJC, we're always flexible. So we are prepared to hold the very same event right here in the International Ballroom of the Washington Hilton. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time of increasing polarization in America, AJC recognizes the need to use our platform to highlight the importance of standing united against hate and violence. This event, entitled Community of Conscience, will serve as a powerful demonstration of our enduring commitment to pluralism and to mutual respect. AJC will welcome civic leaders, faith leaders, community partners of many stripes to join in our clarion call for an America that fulfills its promise for all. Please make your way back into this room at 6 o'clock tonight. The event will begin promptly at 6:30, but seats again may be at a premium. This special event, never before held at AJC Global Forum, is not to be missed. I look forward to seeing all of you back here at 6 o'clock. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. This concludes this afternoon's plenary. Please make your way back to the International Ballroom by 6 o'clock p.m. The Community of Conscience event will begin promptly at 6:30.